It's the long race. I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here.
Well, former frontrunner Joe Biden, I say former, already conceding defeat in New Hampshire ahead of Tuesday's primary. And it's time now for our Sunday group. GOP strategist Karl Rove, Julie Pace, Washington bureau chief for the Associated Press, Dana Perino, anchor of the Daily Briefing, and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Well, Dana, as our messaging guru, how good an idea to acknowledge that you're going to lose a couple of days before people even go to the polls?
I would say this is Joe Biden in the debate the other night. That was an opening line, and it was a little bit shocking, and I'm sure disappointing to some of his supporters. However, that was clearly planned by his campaign. They want to lower expectations. The problem is they've been lowering expectations so far down that you wonder how they think that they can bounce back. You know, we know a lot about what's happening here in New Hampshire, kind of know what happened in Iowa. We don't know a lot about Nevada or South Carolina. He had a lead there, but I feel like the national lead is starting to slip away from him. I thought from a communication standpoint, Bernie Sanders feels to me like their best communicator. He's the one that's punching. I might not agree with him, but he's at least the one that's really trying to take it to President Trump. But I would also say you're not talking a lot about Elizabeth Warren. Coming in third means that you don't get a lot of attention. But Amy Klobuchar was described by some political analysts here and reporters in this state saying she had such a good debate performance on Friday night that she's the one that's on the move, and she was said to be the most interesting one to watch. Yeah, it's interesting. There was a new poll today, I think it was the Boston Globe poll, and it indicated that Buttigieg, off his debate performance, slipped a couple of points, and Amy Klobuchar went up 3 points, which brings me to you, Julie. What's your read on this race now, 2 days out? Are Buttigieg and Sanders still the front runners? And what are, among the other three, Warren, Biden, Klobuchar, who do you think is most likely to spring a surprise? I think you have to look at what's happening in New Hampshire, and then you have to look at what could happen in the states to come. In New Hampshire, I think everywhere you go right now, you feel a lot of energy for Bernie Sanders. It's really undeniable right now. Buttigieg does seem to have gotten a bounce here coming out of Iowa. But I would say watch Klobuchar. She has had strong debates throughout this cycle, but she's never had a debate that has been this close to a voting contest. And this is when people start to tune in. And when I was out yesterday talking with voters and at events, not just her events, but others, a lot of interest in her. The big question, though, is, you know, Iowa and New Hampshire, we talk about this a lot. These are two states that don't look like the rest of the country, and they don't look like the rest of the Democratic Party. The challenge for Joe Biden right now is to hang on until South Carolina. Can he keep his supporters there energized enough and thinking that he actually is electable, or will he go in there with a real sense that this is a campaign that's on the decline? Karl, you've had some experience in New Hampshire. I always like to bring this up. I've been planning this question for about 48 hours. You and George W. Bush, and I like to say you and George W. Bush, not George W. Bush and you, 2000 New Hampshire primary, lost in an upset to John. 18 points. To John McCain. Yeah, all right, good. I'm glad to see you don't remember. How do you read the Democratic race in New Hampshire 2 days out? Well, we'll have a surprise. We know one thing, Bernie Sanders, who won here by 22 points last time around, if he wins, is not going to be winning by 22 points. This field is fragmented. For the first time ever, we're going to have 5 candidates who are getting delegates out of Iowa. The previous record was 3. Lowest percentage winner, 26.8 in Iowa ever. And we're going to have a similarly fragmented picture here. What was interesting to me was your interview with Sanders, who talked about a great drive-by. 0.02% of the money that Pete Buttigieg has raised has come from 40 billionaires who gave him $2,800 each. And yet suddenly those contributions made him responsible for the opioid crisis and fossil fuels and climate. I thought that was really great on Bernie's part. Just drive it in there. And the same with his interview with his question with you on money. We pay for everything, he said. Well, that's not what he told Norah O'Donnell. He said, I don't even know what it costs. Nobody knows. So what is it? But it artfully done, and I think enough to keep him in the hunt for first. But I want to pick up on something you said, because back in 2016, now, you know, we need to point out, he's from the neighboring state of Vermont. People in New Hampshire have known him for decades. He beat Hillary Clinton 60% to 38, 22 points. Let's say he beats Buttigieg by 5 points. Is that a victory, or is that... Well, it is a victory. You can't take that away from him, but it is a sign of the fragmentation of this field. And it's going to go on at least through March 3rd that this field is going to be fragmented. Think about it. We got 5 people competing here.
We don't know how many are going to be still alive by March 3rd, but we're going to have another entrant into the cause on March 3rd, Mayor Mike, who's spending god-awful amounts of money in states that vote on the 3rd of March. I cannot turn on my television without seeing the mayor telling me what great accomplishments he's had in New York City, which in Texas is not exactly a great selling message.
All right, that brings me exactly to what I wanted to ask you, Juan, because it looks like the two frontrunners coming out of here are still likely to be Sanders and Buttigieg. Big electability questions about both of them. Right. And Biden's really in a bit of trouble as he heads into Nevada and South Carolina. How well is this setting up for Mayor Bloomberg coming in March 3rd, Super Tuesday, 40% of the delegates from sea to shining sea being voted on?
I don't think there's any question, even though he's on the sidelines, Chris, Mayor Bloomberg had a very good week, and I'll tell you why. The centrist lane is opening up for him. Obviously, you've heard about the struggles that, that you see Vice President Biden having at this moment. Those struggles mean that people like Mayor Bloomberg, are being sought because people want someone that they can believe can stop a second term for Donald Trump. They're looking for a strong centrist and thinking maybe the centrist there right now is stumbling. And I think that his ads have been powerful. And picking up on what Karl said, he pledged this past week to double down on the existing spending. He's already spent $300 million since November, and he's doubling down on that. Secondly, the DNC rules now allow him into future debates, so he will be on the debate stage. I don't know how charismatic he might be, but he'll be there, so he'll be a player. And then finally, you have Donald Trump. Donald Trump this week saying, hey, little Mike, he needs a box at the debates, trying to make fun of him. I think that also elevates this idea that maybe President Trump now sees him and his big dollars as a threat.
Well, let me pick up on that with you, Julie. For all of the president's bluster about Biden, and not little Mike, mini Mike.
Mini Mike, thank you.
Yes, mini Mike. Who do you get the sense the president and his campaign are most worried about of all the Democrats facing in November?
There are two candidates that I hear a lot about from Trump advisors. One is Bloomberg, and that is simply he is just in their face right now. The president is a big TV watcher. He sees Michael Bloomberg ads. And what they worry about with Bloomberg is not just a head-to-head face-off in the fall, but it's that Bloomberg is committing to spending a tremendous amount of money for whoever the Democratic nominee is. And that's important because Democrats are trailing Trump in money right now. The other one I hear about a lot is Sanders. You know, the public line about Sanders from Republicans right now is that he's a socialist. There's no way that a socialist can win in this country. But Donald Trump, more than anybody, knows what it is like to run for president and have everyone say you're going to lose, have everyone say there is no path forward for you. And so that worries them. They know that this is a country that is in an unpredictable mood right now, that is in the mood for change, and that doesn't really rule anybody out.
And do they think that perhaps the populist wave that brought Trump in 2016 could bring Sanders in 2020?
There's definitely some overlap. You can see in some of supporters, some of those white working class supporters who are drawn to the same trade message that Trump has. Bernie has that too, that sort of anti free trade message, pull out of the big multilateral deals. They do think that there is the potential that some of those voters that swung from Obama to Trump could swing to a Bernie Sanders.
All right.